A giant yellow wall divides a neighborhood, but a storm reveals the HOA's lies. Watch Tiana's heroic fight, like, subscribe, and hit the bell for our latest wild HOA dramas and justice stories. I woke up that Monday morning in Palm Grove to the sound of construction equipment roaring outside my window, a noise so jarring it pulled me, Tiana Brooks, out of a deep sleep. And I thought maybe they were fixing the potholes on our street, but when I stepped onto my porch, my heart stopped. Because there, stretching across the entire length of my front yard, was a massive yellow wall, at least 30 feet high, its garish paint gleaming in the Florida sun, cutting off my house and the other homes on my block from the rest of the neighborhood. And I stood there, my coffee mug trembling in my hand, as I took in the sight, the wall running down the middle of the street, separating the handful of Black and Latino families on my side from the mostly white, affluent residents on the other. And I knew this wasn't about potholes. This was something sinister. So I marched over to the construction crew, my voice sharp. What is this? Who authorized this wall? It's blocking my entire street. And one of the workers, a young guy in a hard hat, shrugged, handing me a flyer. HOA project. Ma'am, says here it's a community art installation to enhance aesthetic boundaries. And I felt my blood boil as I read the flyer. The words Palm Grove HOA Architectural Innovation printed in bold, claiming this monstrosity was a symbol of unity. But I knew better, because I'd lived in Palm Grove for 5 years, a Black woman in a neighborhood where I'd always felt the whispers, the stares, the comments like, she must be on welfare to afford that house. Despite the fact that I was a structural engineer, running a free tutoring center for kids of color out of my garage, and I knew exactly who was behind this, because there he was, Richard Hayes, the HOA president, stepping out of his shiny white SUV, his gray suit as stiff as his smile, his pale blue eyes glinting with satisfaction as he walked toward me. Good morning, Ms. Brooks. I see you've noticed our new project. Isn't it stunning? We're calling it the Golden Divide, a real statement piece. And I felt my fists clench, my voice low but firm. Richard, this wall is blocking my street. I can't even get my car out. And it's separating my side of the neighborhood from yours. What's this really about? And his smile didn't waver, but his tone turned cold. It's about maintaining standards. Tiana, Palm Grove has an image to uphold, and frankly, some residents don't fit that image. This wall is a reminder of where the line is. If you don't like it, maybe you should consider moving somewhere more suitable. And there it was, the racism I'd always suspected, now out in the open. His words a clear message. You don't belong here because you're Black. And I felt my heart pound, my mind racing as I shot back. This isn't about standards. This is about segregation. You're trying to push us out, but I'm not going anywhere. And this wall isn't staying. And Richard's eyes narrowed, his voice a hiss. Good luck with that, Ms. Brooks. The HOA has every right to beautify the neighborhood. And I've got the board and the residents on my side. You're fighting a losing battle. And as he turned to walk away, I noticed neighbors on the other side of the wall peeking out their windows. Some with curiosity, others with smug approval. And I knew I was in for a fight. But what Richard didn't know was that I wasn't just a tutor or a mom. I was a structural engineer, and I could already see the cracks in the wall's foundation, the cheap materials, the shoddy construction, and I knew this wasn't just a symbol of hate. It was a disaster waiting to happen. So I pulled out my phone, snapping photos of the wall, my voice steady as I called my friend Lena, a fellow engineer. Lena, I need your help. The HOA just built a giant yellow wall to segregate my street, and I think it's unsafe. We need to inspect it. Now. And as I hung up, I looked at that wall, its bright yellow paint a mockery of the unity Richard claimed. And I swore to myself I'd tear it down, not just for me, but for every family on my side of the street, for every kid I tutored, for every person of color who'd ever been made to feel less than in Palm Grove. Because this was my home, And I wasn't going to let Richard Hayes destroy it, but I had no idea then just how dangerous that wall would become, or how a storm would soon turn it into a ticking time bomb that would change Palm Grove forever. Yeah, the days after the yellow wall went up felt like a pressure cooker in Palm Grove, and I, Tiana Brooks, could sense the heat rising with every glance from my neighbors on the other side, their whispers cutting through the humid Florida air as I tried to go about my day. My tutoring center in the garage now harder to access because the wall blocked the easiest route for the kids, forcing them to walk a half-mile detour just to get to my house. And I saw the frustration in their parents' eyes. Families like the Browns and the Garcias, Black and Latino folks who'd lived on this side of the street for years, now feeling more isolated than ever. And I knew Richard Hayes had planned it that way, his words from that first morning echoing in my mind. Maybe you should consider moving somewhere more suitable. A clear message that he wanted us gone, and he wasn't stopping at the wall, because by the end of the week, I found a bright red violation notice taped to my door, accusing me of operating an unpermitted business with my tutoring center, threatening a $1,000 fine if I didn't shut it down, and I felt my stomach churn, because I'd been running that center for 3 years, teaching math and science to kids of color for free, kids who couldn't afford the fancy tutors the white families on the other side hired. And I'd never had a problem until now. Until Richard decided to use the HOA's rules as a weapon. And I wasn't the only one. Because Mrs. Brown, a single mom down the street, got a notice for her son's bike being improperly parked in her own driveway. And Mr. Garcia was fined for excessive noise after his kids played soccer in their yard. And I knew this was a coordinated attack. Richard's way of making our lives miserable until we left. But he wasn't just targeting us with fines. He was spreading poison through the neighborhood, posting in the Palm Grove online group, claiming my tutoring center was attracting undesirables and lowering property values. And I saw the comments, one neighbor writing, "I moved here to get away from that kind of thing. If she wants to run a charity, she should do it somewhere else." And another adding, "This wall is the best thing the HOA's done. Keeps the riffraff on their side." And I felt my chest tighten, the racism so blatant it made my skin crawl. But I also saw the fear in the kids' eyes when they showed up for tutoring. Little Jamal Brown asking, "Miss Tiana, are we going to have to move? I don't want to leave my friends." And I hugged him tight, my voice steady. "No, baby, we're not going anywhere. I'm going to fix this." But inside I was raging, because I knew Richard was counting on us to break, and I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. So I called Lena, my engineer friend, who'd come over the day after the wall went up, and we'd spent hours inspecting it. Her voice grim as she said, "Tiana, this wall is a disaster. The concrete mix is substandard. The rebar's spaced too far apart. It's not anchored properly. A strong storm could bring it down, and if it falls, it'll crush anything in its path." And I felt a chill run down my spine, because I knew hurricane season was just weeks away, and this wall wasn't just a symbol of hate, it was a death trap. So I started documenting everything, taking photos of the cracks, the uneven foundation, the cheap materials, and I went to the county building office, requesting the permits for the wall, but the clerk, a nervous young woman, told me, "I'm sorry, ma'am. The HOA filed the permits under a special expedited process. I can't release them without their approval." And I knew Richard had friends in high places, but I wasn't giving up. So I called a meeting with the families on my side of the wall, gathering the Browns, the Garcias, and a few others in my living room, my voice urgent. This wall isn't just about keeping us out. It's dangerous. I've seen the construction. It's not safe. And Richard's trying to fine us into leaving, but we're not going to let him win. We need to fight back, together. And Mrs. Brown nodded, her eyes fierce. "I'm with you, Tiana. He's been after us for years. It's time we stood up." But Mr. Garcia hesitated, his voice low. "I want to fight, but I'm scared. Richard's got the whole HOA behind him, and if we push too hard, they'll make our lives hell." And I understood his fear. because I felt it too. The weight of being seen as the troublemakers in a neighborhood that already looked down on us. But I also knew we had no choice. So I said, I get it, but if we don't fight now, that wall will stay, and so will the fines, the harassment. We're stronger together. And slowly, they agreed, their faces set with determination. And as we planned our next move, I knew Richard wouldn't stop, because he was betting on our silence. But what he didn't know was that I was already one step ahead, and a storm was coming, one that would bring his wall down, and his lies with it. Because I wasn't just fighting for my street, I was fighting for our right to exist here, and I wasn't going to let him take that away. The yellow wall in Palm Grove had become more than just a physical barrier by the end of that week. It was a glaring symbol of division, splitting the neighborhood along lines of race and class in a way that I, Tiana Brooks, couldn't ignore. And I knew we had to act, because Richard Hayes and the HOA weren't going to stop their harassment unless we made them. So I decided to organize a peaceful protest right at the wall, a chance to show the community what was really happening. And I spent the morning making signs with the kids from my tutoring center, their small hands painting messages like, "Tear down this wall," and "We belong here," in bright reds and blues, their laughter a stark contrast to the tension I felt as I hammered the signs into my lawn. And by noon, a small crowd had gathered on my side of the wall, the Browns, the Garcias, and a few other families from our block, about 20 of us in total, holding our signs and chanting, "No more walls, no more hate, Palm Grove for everyone," our voices echoing off the garish yellow surface. And I felt a surge of hope, because this was the first time we'd stood together like this. But that hope didn't last long, because within an hour, I heard the screech of tires, and Richard Hayes pulled up in his white SUV, his face red with fury as he stepped out, followed by 2 police officers, their hands resting on their belts. And I knew he'd called them to shut us down, his voice booming over our chants. "This is an illegal gathering. Ms. Brooks, you're disturbing the peace and blocking a public thoroughfare. I'm giving you 5 minutes to disperse, or these officers will arrest you." And I felt my heart race, my hands gripping my sign as I stepped forward, my voice steady. "Richard, this is my property, we're not blocking anything. We're exercising our right to protest. This wall is a symbol of racism, and we're not going anywhere until it comes down." And his eyes narrowed, his tone dripping with disdain. "You're causing trouble, Tiana, just like I knew you would. People like you always do. If you cared about this community, you'd pack up your little tutoring operation and leave." And I felt the sting of his words, the racism so blatant it made my skin crawl. But I wasn't backing down, so I turned to the officers, my voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Officers, we're not breaking any laws. I have permits for this gathering, and this wall is a safety hazard. I'm a structural engineer, and I can prove it's not up to code." And I pulled out the photos Lena and I had taken, the cracks, the shoddy construction. But the older officer, a white man with a stern face, waved me off. "Ma'am, we're not here to inspect walls. We're here because of a noise complaint. You need to disperse now." And I saw the younger officer, a black man, hesitate, his eyes flickering to the kids holding us signs. But he didn't speak up, and I knew we were on our own. So I turned to the crowd, my voice firm. "We're not leaving, but we'll keep it peaceful. Let's sit down. We're not hurting anyone." And we sat, linking arms, our signs propped up around us. But Richard wasn't done. He turned to the other side of the wall, where a group of white neighbors had gathered, their faces a mix of curiosity and disapproval, and he shouted, "See what we're dealing with? This is why we need the wall, to keep Palm Grove safe, to keep out the troublemakers." And I saw some of them nod. Mrs. Carter, a wealthy retiree, clapping in support, her voice carrying. "I agree, Richard. We didn't sign up for this. They're ruining our neighborhood." But I also saw others, like the Wilsons, a younger white couple, shift uncomfortably, their eyes darting to me, And I knew the neighborhood was splitting, the wall doing exactly what Richard intended, dividing us into us and them. And I felt a pang of frustration because I'd hoped more people would see through his lies. But I also knew fear was a powerful weapon, and Richard was wielding it like a pro. So I kept chanting, my voice rising. No more walls, no more hate. And the families with me joined in, our voices a chorus of defiance. But then the older officer stepped forward, his voice gruff. That's enough. You are under arrest for failure to comply. And he grabbed my arm, his grip tight, and I heard the kids scream, little Jamal Brown crying, Don't take Tiana. And I felt my heart break, but I stayed calm, my voice steady. It's okay, Jamal, I'll be fine. Keep the signs up. And as the officer cuffed me, I saw Richard smirk, his victory written all over his face. But what he didn't know was that I'd already planted the seeds of his downfall. Because Lena had been recording the whole thing, live streaming it to a local news outlet. And as I was led to the police car, I saw the Wilsons pull out their phones, their faces hard with resolve. And I knew this wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Because Richard had just turned me into a symbol, a black woman fighting for her community. And he was about to find out what happens when you push a community too far, especially with a storm on the horizon that would bring his wall and his lies crashing down. The arrest at the protest sent shockwaves through Palm Grove. But for me, Tiana Brooks, it only fueled my determination. Because as I sat in the back of the police car, my wrists aching from the cuffs, I knew this was bigger than me, bigger than the yellow wall. It was about justice for every family on my side of the street. And I wasn't going to let Richard Hayes win. So when I was released a few hours later with a warning for disturbing the peace, I went straight home. My mind racing as I met Lena in my living room, her laptop open, her voice urgent. Tiana, the live stream went viral. Local news picked it up. People are talking, but we need more. We need to prove this wall is a disaster. And I think I found something. And she pulled up a file, a grainy PDF she'd managed to get from a contact at the county, the permits for the wall, and my heart skipped a beat as I scanned the document, because the contractor listed was a company called Sunshine Builders, a name I recognized from a scandal a few years back, a firm notorious for cutting corners. And the budget for the wall was $120,000, far more than what a structure like this should cost, especially given the shoddy materials we'd already documented. And I felt a surge of adrenaline because I knew this was the break we needed. So I said, Lena, this doesn't add up. $120,000 for a wall made of cheap concrete and barely any rebar. Richard's hiding something. We need to dig deeper. And she nodded, her fingers flying over the keyboard. I'm on it. I've got a friend who can trace financial records. Let's see where that money really went. And while Lena worked, I went back to the wall, my engineer's eye scanning every inch, taking more photos, measuring the cracks that were already widening, because I knew we were running out of time. Hurricane season was closing in, and the National Weather Service had just issued a warning for a major storm hitting in 3 days. A Category 3 with winds strong enough to topple a structure as poorly built as this one. And I felt a chill run down my spine, because if that wall came down, it wouldn't just be a symbol of Richard's hate. It would be a deadly avalanche of concrete. So I started knocking on doors, first on my side, then risking the half-mile walk around the wall to the other side, my voice urgent as I spoke to every neighbor I could. I'm Tiana Brooks. I'm an engineer. This wall isn't safe. I've seen the construction. It's going to collapse in the storm. We need to get it down before it hurts someone. And on my side, the Browns and Garcias nodded immediately, their faces set with worry. Mrs. Brown saying, I knew it looked flimsy. What do we do, Tiana? And I replied, we need to pressure the HOA to tear it down. And if they won't, we'll take it to the county. But we need more support. And on the other side, some listened, like the Wilsons, who'd seen the live stream. Mr. Wilson's voice low. We believe you, Tiana. We've never liked Richard's tactics. What can we do? But others, like Mrs. A. Carter, slam their doors, her voice sharp. You're just trying to cause trouble. That wall keeps us safe. Stay on your seal. And I felt the divide deepen, Richard's propaganda working its magic. But I also knew the truth was on my side. And that night, Lena called me, her voice trembling with excitement. Tiana, I've got it. Sunshine Builders is a shell company, owned by Richard's cousin. And the 120,000, only 30,000 went to the wall. The rest was funneled to Richard's personal account. He's been stealing from the HOA. And I felt my jaw drop. Because this wasn't just negligence, it was fraud. And it explained the cheap construction. Richard had pocketed the difference, putting the entire neighborhood at risk. So I gathered the evidence, the permits, the financial records, the photos of the wall, and I went to the county building inspector the next morning, my voice firm. I'm an engineer. This wall is a hazard. It's going to collapse in the storm. And here's proof the HOA president embezzled the funds meant for it. And the inspector, a middle-aged woman with a no-nonsense look, took the file, her eyes narrowing as she read, "This is serious. Ms. Brooks, I'll order an immediate inspection, but I can't guarantee we'll get it down before the storm. The HOA's got connections." And I felt a wave of frustration because I knew she was right. Richard had friends in high places. But I also knew I couldn't wait. So I went back to Palm Grove, posting flyers around the neighborhood, warning everyone about the storm and the wall, and I called a community meeting on my lawn, my voice carrying over the small crowd. This wall isn't just wrong, it's dangerous. Richard stole the money meant to build it properly, and when the storm hits, it's coming down. We need to be ready. And some neighbors, like the Wilsons, agreed to help. But others, loyal to Richard, scoffed. Mrs. Carter shouting, "You're scaremongering. That wall's fine. You just want attention." And I saw Richard watching from his side of the wall, his smirk still in place. But I also saw the sky darkening, the first signs of the storm rolling in. And I knew time was running out, because when that wall fell, it wouldn't care which side of Palm Grove you lived on. And Richard was about to learn the hard way that you can't build a legacy on lies, not when a storm is coming to wash it all away. Wait, Tatum. The storm rolled into Palm Groves with a fury I'd never seen before, the sky turning an ominous gray as Tiana Brooks, stood on my porch, the wind whipping through the trees, the air thick with the scent of rain and danger. And I knew the yellow wall, that hateful barrier Richard Hayes had built to divide us, was a ticking time bomb. Because I'd seen the cracks, the cheap concrete, the lack of proper reinforcement, and with a Category 3 hurricane bearing down on us. I knew it wouldn't hold, so I spent the morning preparing, boarding up my windows, moving my tutoring supplies to the highest shelves. But my mind wasn't on my own safety. It was on the neighborhood, on the families on both sides of the wall, because if it collapsed, it wouldn't discriminate. It would crush anything in its path, and I couldn't let that happen. So I grabbed my flashlight, my raincoat, and a megaphone I'd borrowed from the Garcias. And I started going door to door on my side of the wall, my voice urgent over the howling wind. "Everyone, get to higher ground. The wall's not safe. It's going to come down. We need to evacuate now." And the Browns and Garcias didn't hesitate, their faces pale with fears as they gathered their kids, Mrs. Brown clutching her son Jamal tight, her voice trembling. "Tiana, are you sure? What about the other side?" And I nodded, my heart pounding. "I'm going to warn them too. But we need to move. Now." And as we helped each other move to the community center, the only building on higher ground, I knew I couldn't stop there. So I ran around the wall, the half-mile detour feeling endless as the rain started to fall, heavy drops soaking through my coat, and I reached the other side, banging on doors, my megaphone crackling as I shouted, "This is Tiana Brooks. The wall's going to collapse. Get to the community center. It's not safe." And some, like the Wilsons, opened their doors immediately. Mr. Wilson's voice steady. We trust you, Tiana, let's go. But others, like Mrs. Carter, sneered through her window. You're just trying to scare us. That wall's fine. Leave us alone. And I felt a wave of frustration, but I didn't have time to argue because the wind was picking up, gusts strong enough to shake the trees, and I could hear the wall groaning. A deep, ominous sound that sent chills down my spine, and I knew it was now or never. So I ran back to my side, helping the last families get to safety. But as I turned to head to the community center myself, I heard a deafening crack, the sound of concrete splitting. And I looked up just in time to see the yellow wall start to crumble, chunks of it falling like a slow-motion avalanche. And I screamed, "Run! It's coming down!" And I sprinted toward the Brown's house, where Mrs. Brown was still grabbing a photo album, my voice raw. "Mrs. Brown, now! It's falling!" And I grabbed her arm, pulling her and Jamal out the door just as a massive section of the wall crashed down, the impact shaking the ground, debris flying everywhere, and I shielded them with my body, my heart racing as I heard screams from the other side. Because the wall had fallen both ways, crushing cars, smashing fences, and I knew people were in danger. So I ran toward the chaos, my flashlight cutting through the rain and darkness, and I saw Mr. Wilson pinned under a piece of concrete, his leg trapped, his wife crying beside him. "Help, please. He's stuck." And I didn't hesitate, dropping to my knees, using all my strength to lift the slab just enough for Mrs. Wilson to pull him free, his face pale with pain but alive. And I kept going, helping family after family, until I heard a shout from the other side. "Richard's house! It's bad!" And I ran over, my stomach dropping as I saw Richard Hayes' SUV buried under a pile of rubble, his front door blocked, and I could hear him shouting from inside, "Help! I'm trapped!" And despite everything, I couldn't leave him. So I climbed over the debris, my hands bleeding from the jagged edges, and I pried open a window, reaching in to pull him out, his face a mask of shock as he realized I'd saved him. And as I helped him to safety, the storm still raging around us, I saw the neighborhood come together, Black, Latino, white, all helping each other. The Wilsons carrying Mrs. Brown's kids, Mr. Garcia guiding Mrs. Carter to the community center, and I knew this was the moment everything changed, because as the rain slowed, the wall now a pile of rubble, the truth came crashing down with it, and I heard Mrs. Carter's voice, shaky but clear. "Tiana, you were right. You saved us. I'm so sorry." And I turned to Richard, my voice steady. "This is on you, Richard. You built this wall with stolen money. You put us all at risk. And now everyone knows." And his face twisted, his voice weak. "I didn't know it would fall. I just wanted order." But no one was listening, because the community was already turning away from him, their eyes on me. And I knew this wasn't just the end of the wall. It was the end of Richard's reign, because a storm had brought his lies crashing down, and I was ready to build something new in its place, something that would stand stronger than any wall ever could. The aftermath of the storm left Palm Grove in chaos, but for me, Tiana Brooks, it was a moment of clarity, because the yellow wall that had divided us was now a pile of rubble. And with it, Richard Hayes' lies were exposed for all to see. So as the rain slowed to a drizzle and the sun peeked through the clouds, I stood in the middle of the street, my clothes soaked, my hands still trembling from the adrenaline of saving lives. And I watched as the neighborhood came together, Black, Latino, and white families helping each other clear debris, their voices a mix of shock and gratitude. And I knew this was our chance to strike, to hold Richard accountable. So I called an emergency community meeting right there in the street, using the megaphone I'd borrowed, my voice carrying over the crowd of over 50 residents. "Everyone, we need to talk. This wall wasn't just a symbol of hate, it was a disaster waiting to happen. And I have proof that Richard Hayes stole the money meant to build it properly. and I held up the financial records Lena had uncovered, passing copies to the crowd. Sunshine Builders, the company that built this wall, is a shell owned by Richard's cousin. They were paid $120,000, but only $30,000 went to construction. The rest went to Richard's personal account. He put us all at risk for his own greed. And the crowd erupted. Gasps and shouts of, "He stole from us!" and "How could he do this?" echoing through the street, and I saw Mrs. Carter, who'd once supported Richard, stand up, her voice shaking. "Is this true, Richard? Did you really take our money and build a death trap?" And Richard, who'd been standing at the edge of the crowd, his suit muddy from the storm, his face pale, tried to defend himself, his voice weak. "This is a lie. Tiana's trying to turn you against me. I did what was best for Palm Grove. I was maintaining order." But his words fell flat because the evidence was undeniable, and I saw the Wilsons step forward, Mr. Wilson's voice firm. "You almost killed my family. Richard, that wall fell on my house. Tiana saved us. Not you. You're done." And the crowd roared in agreement, chanting, "Resign, resign," as Richard's face twisted with rage, his voice shrill. "You'll regret this. All of you, Wettig. I made this neighborhood what it is." But no one was listening anymore, because the truth had set them free, and I knew we had to act fast. So I turned to the crowd. "We need a new HOA, one that works for all of us, not against us. I'm calling for an election, right now. Who's with me?" And hands shot up. The Browns, the Garcias, the Wilsons, even Mrs. Carter. Her eyes filled with tears as she raised her hand, and I felt a surge of hope, because this was the unity I'd been fighting for. But Richard wasn't going down quietly, because the next day, as the county inspector arrived to investigate the wall's collapse, I got a certified letter from Richard's lawyer, accusing me of defamation and inciting a riot, demanding $200,000 in damages. And I felt a wave of frustration, because even after everything, he was still trying to fight. But I also knew he was desperate, because the inspector's report came back that afternoon, confirming everything Lena and I had found. The wall was built with substandard materials, violating multiple building codes, and the financial records showed clear evidence of fraud. So I took the report to the local news, who'd been covering the story since the live stream, and they ran a segment that evening. HOA president embezzles funds, endangers community with deadly wall. And I watched as Richard's reputation crumbled, his face on every TV screen in Palm Grove. And by the next morning, the county prosecutor's office announced an investigation into Richard for fraud and reckless endangerment, and I knew he was finished. So I gathered the community again, this time at the community center, my voice steady as I addressed the crowd. "Richard's gone, but this isn't over. We need to rebuild, not just our street, but our community. We're going to tear down the last of this wall, and we're going to build something new, a place where everyone belongs." And the crowd cheered, their faces a mix of determination and hope. And I saw Mrs. Carter approach me after the meeting, her voice soft. "Tiana, I was wrong. I let fear and prejudice guide me. But you saved my family. I want to help. Whatever you need." And I nodded, grateful for her change of heart, because I knew we'd need every ally to rebuild. And as the weeks passed, I led the effort to clear the debris, working with the county to secure funds for repairs. And I proposed turning the space where the wall once stood into a community garden, a place for everyone to come together. And the new HOA board, elected that night with me as a member, approved it unanimously. And I knew this was just the beginning, because Palm Grove was finally becoming the home I'd always wanted it to be, a place where walls didn't divide us, but bridges brought us together, and I was ready to lead that change, no matter what challenges lay ahead. With Richard Hayes out of power and facing criminal charges, Palm Grove felt like a neighborhood breathing freely for the first time in years. And I, Tiana Brooks, stood at the heart of that change, not as a victor, but as a builder. Because I knew tearing down the yellow wall was only the first step. The real work was in rebuilding a community that had been divided by racism and greed. So I threw myself into the effort, starting with the new HOA board, a group that now included me, Mrs. Brown, Mr. Garcia, and even Mr. Wilson, who'd stepped up after the storm, and we met every week at the community center. Our voices united as we rewrote the bylaws, banning discriminatory fines, ensuring transparency in every budget, and prioritizing projects that brought us together, like the community garden we'd planned where the wall once stood. And within a month, the garden was taking shape. Volunteers from both sides of the old divide working side by side, planting rows of tomatoes, sunflowers, and peppers. Their laughter filling the air as kids ran through the dirt. Kyla Brown and little Maria Garcia giggling as they chased each other with watering cans. And I watched from a bench, my heart swelling with hope, because this was what I dreamed of. A palm grove where everyone belonged. But I also knew change wasn't easy, because some residents, like Mrs. Carter's old friend, Mrs. Ellis, still clung to their prejudices, her voice sharp at one of our meetings. I don't see why we need all these changes. Things were fine before. Now it's all so chaotic. And I knew what she meant by chaotic. She meant the diversity, the inclusivity, the fact that Palm Grove wasn't her exclusive little bubble anymore. But I didn't let her words stop me. Instead, I invited her to the garden's opening ceremony, hoping to show her what we'd built. And to my surprise, she showed up. Her face tight with discomfort at first. But when Kyla ran up to her, offering a sunflower she'd picked, Mrs. Ellis's expression softened, and she muttered, "Maybe this isn't so bad." And I knew change was slow, but it was happening. And I kept pushing, organizing events to bring the neighborhood together, like a weekly potluck in the garden, where families brought dishes from their cultures, the Browns sharing collard greens, the Garcias with tamales, the Wilsons with apple pie, and we ate under string lights. Music playing as neighbors who'd once avoided each other now shared stories and laughter. And I saw Mrs. Carter there helping serve food, her voice soft as she said, "Tiana, I never thought I'd see this. I was so wrong about you, about all of you." And I smiled, because those moments were the real victory. Not just the garden, but the breaking down of walls in people's hearts. And we didn't stop there. I proposed using some of the recovered HOA funds, the money Richard had stolen, to start a scholarship program for the kids in my tutoring center, giving them a chance at college. At dreams their parents had been denied, and the board approved it unanimously, naming it the Palm Grove Future Fund. And I watched as those kids thrived. Jamal Brown beaming as he told me he wanted to be an engineer like me. And I knew we were building more than a garden. We were building a future. But I also knew the past wasn't entirely gone, because I heard whispers that Richard, out on bail, pending his trial, had been meeting with some of his old allies, trying to stir up trouble, claiming the new HOA was illegitimate and pushing a radical agenda. And I saw a few flyers pop up around the neighborhood, anonymous but clearly his doing, accusing me of dividing the community with my race baiting. And I felt a pang of anger, because even after everything, he was still trying to tear us apart. So I called a board meeting, my voice firm. We can't let Richard sabotage what we've built. We need to show the neighborhood we're stronger than his lies. Let's organize a unity festival, celebrate everything that makes Palm Grove special, and invite everyone. And the board agreed, setting the date for the following weekend. And the festival was a success. The garden packed with families, music from every culture filling the air, kids painting murals on a new community wall, this one covered in messages of love and unity. And I saw Mrs. Ellis there, helping serve lemonade, her smile genuine as she chatted with Mrs. Brown, and I knew we were winning, but I also knew the fight wasn't over, because as the festival wound down, I got a call from Lena, her voice tense. "Tiana, Richard's been talking to a developer. He's trying to sell his property to a company that wants to turn Palm Grove into condos. It could push out half the families here." And I felt my stomach drop, because I knew what that meant. Gentrification would drive up prices, force out the very people I'd fought for. But I also knew that I had the community behind me now. And as I looked out at the festival, at the faces of the neighbors who'd become my family, I said, "We'll stop him, Lena. We've come too far to lose this now." And I knew we'd fight. Because Palm Grove wasn't just a neighborhood anymore. It was a movement. And I'd never stop fighting for it, no matter what Richard threw at us next. The Unity Festival marked a new beginning for Palm Grove. And as I, Tiana Brooks, stood in the community garden a year later, watching the sun set over rows of blooming sunflowers, I felt a deep sense of peace, because the neighborhood I'd fought for had become a place of true belonging, where kids of every race played together, their laughter echoing through the air, and I could see the changes we'd made. The garden now a vibrant hub with picnic tables and a mural painted by the children. Its bright colors spelling out Palm Grove, one community, one heart. A far cry from the yellow wall that had once divided us. And I knew this was the legacy we'd built, not just for ourselves, but for every family who'd ever felt out of place here. So I poured my energy into making sure that legacy lasted, working with the new HOA board to secure the zoning protections we needed. Blocking Richard Hayes' attempt to sell his property to a developer by using my engineering expertise to prove the land wasn't suitable for condos. And we expanded the Palm Grove Future Fund, helping more kids go to college. Kids like Jamal Brown, who just won a scholarship to study engineering, his mom hugging me with tears in her eyes. "Tiana, you gave him a future. I'll never forget that." And I smiled, because that was why I'd fought for the future, not just for my community, but for every child who deserved a chance. And we didn't stop there. We turned the garden into a learning space, hosting workshops on everything from gardening to racial equity, inviting speakers to talk about the history of segregation in housing. And I watched as minds opened. Even Mrs. Ellis, who'd once scoffed at our changes, now leading a weekly story time for the kids, reading books about diversity and courage, her voice soft as she told me, "I was wrong, Tiana. You showed me what community really means." And I felt a lump in my throat, because those moments were the real victory. Not just the garden or the new rules, but the way Palm Grove had become a place where people saw each other, truly saw each other, and we held an annual festival to celebrate. The whole neighborhood coming together with music, food, and dance. The Browns' collard greens next to the Garcia's tamales, the Wilsons' apple pie next to Misso, Carter's peach cobbler. And I watched as families who'd once lived on opposite sides of the wall now danced together under the string lights. Kyla Brown and Maria Garcia twirling in their bright dresses, their laughter a reminder of what we'd achieved. But I also knew the fight wasn't over, because racism doesn't disappear overnight. And I heard whispers of new residents moving in, some bringing old prejudices with them. But I also saw hope in the way the kids played without fear, in the way Mrs. Carter now volunteered at my tutoring center, helping with math lessons, her smile genuine as she said, "I want to give back, Tiana. You taught me how." And I knew those small acts of change were the foundation of something bigger. So I kept pushing, using my platform to advocate for fair housing policies across Florida, speaking at city council meetings, my voice steady as I told our story. Palm Grove is proof that we can break down walls, not just the physical ones, but the ones in our hearts, and we need to keep fighting for communities where everyone belongs. And our story spread, inspiring other neighborhoods to stand up, to demand change. And I got letters from people I'd never met, Black families, Latino families, all saying, "You gave us hope." And I kept every one, a reminder of why I'd started this fight. And as for Richard, his trial ended with a conviction for fraud and reckless endangerment. His property sold to a young Black family who'd moved in with 2 kids and a dog. And I saw neighbors help them unpack. A sight that made my heart swell, because this was the Palm Grove I'd always wanted. A place where no one was pushed out, where diversity wasn't feared but celebrated. And on the anniversary of the storm, we held a ceremony in the garden, unveiling a plaque that read, "In memory of the wall that divided us, and the storm that united us. And I stood at the podium, my voice steady. A year ago, a wall stood here, a symbol of hate. But today, we stand here, a symbol of love. Palm Grove isn't perfect, but it's ours, and we'll keep making it better, together. And the crowd cheered. Kyla Brown running up to hug me, her smile brighter than the sun. And as I looked out at the faces, black, Latino, white, all part of this new Palm Grove, I thought about Richard, now a footnote in our history, his dreams of division shattered, and I didn't feel vindictive. I felt at peace, because the real victory wasn't in his downfall. It was in the thriving community he'd tried to destroy. And as the festival wound down, I sat with Mrs. Brown, her voice soft. Tiana, you changed everything. You showed us what we could be. And I smiled, because I knew she was right. But I also knew it wasn't just me. It was all of us, fighting together. And as I watched the last of the sunset fade, I knew Palm Grove would never be the same. And neither would I. Because this fight had taught me that true change starts with standing up, with refusing to be silenced. And I'd never stop standing up for my community, for a world where everyone belongs. Tiana exposed the HOA's corrupt wall, saved lives during a storm, and united Palm Grove for equality. Thanks for watching. Like, share, and subscribe if you love this story. Hit the bell for our latest videos on HOA battles and community wins. You won't want to miss what's next.